Hello and welcome to My Tiny Bottles, the project where I'm exploring my grandmother's legacy of miniature liquor bottles, one tiny bottle at a time. I'm your host, Tammy Coxon. Bottle number 30 is Austin Nichols Wild Turkey Bourbon, bottled at 8 years old and 101 proof. It's in a bottle that was manufactured in 1979, which usually means it was filled within a year of that. We've already had one Wild Turkey product on My Tiny Bottles, bottle number 9, Wild Turkey Liqueur, which was introduced in 1976. While it was an attempt to change bourbon to be something that they thought women would want to drink, this bottle of Wild Turkey is everything they thought would keep women away. Even today, Wild Turkey is known as a bit of a throwback, still made much the same way it's been made since it began. So when did it begin? The name Wild Turkey was coined in 1940 when a company executive for Austin Nichols took some bourbon from the Rippy distillery on a hunting trip for wild turkeys. His friends liked it so much that they kept asking him for more of that wild turkey whiskey. A brand name was born, and the first bottles were released in 1942. But the whiskey had obviously been around before that. Austin Nichols was a wholesale grocery company that, starting in the 1850s, bought wine and whiskey, which they bottled and labeled with their own name. Some of that whiskey was bourbon whiskey purchased from the Rippy distillery in Kentucky. The Rippy family had been making bourbon since 1869, and they were good at it. In 1893, they even beat out 400 competitors for the right to have their bourbon represent America at the World's Fair in Chicago. After buying whiskey from them for decades, Austin Nichols bought the distillery itself in 1971, renamed it Wild Turkey Distillery, and its location, Wild Turkey Hill. Before that, though, in 1954, it was called the Boulevard Distillery, and the owners of that distillery hired a guy named Jimmy Russell. He learned the distilling trade from then-master distiller Bill Hughes, as well as Ernest W. Rippy, son of the original distiller. In 1967, Jimmy became the company's third master distiller and still holds that position today, sharing it with his son Eddie. The Wild Turkey we drink today is very much a result of Jimmy's long vision. While the company has expanded and diversified, their core product, Wild Turkey 101, has purposefully tried to stay the same. This was a hard line to take in the 1970s. As I talked about in bottle number 1, Maker's Mark, the 60s and 70s were a tough time for bourbon because consumer tastes were changing. In 1976, vodka outsold whiskey for the first time and just kept going from there. Many whiskey producers responded by lowering their proof or switching to light whiskeys and blends that they thought would be more appealing. Wild Turkey wasn't immune. They added a couple of lower proof lines in the early 70s and released Wild Turkey Liqueur, but they never dumbed down the 101 that was their standard bearer. All I can say is I'm excited to try this one. I'm already a fan of Wild Turkey. Now, before 1971, Austin Nichols sourced bourbon for Wild Turkey from a variety of distilleries, although most is thought to have been from that original Rippy, then Boulevard distillery where Jimmy started his tenure. My bottle's dated 1979, and the whiskey in it was aged 8 years, so it should be the real deal. Old bottles of Wild Turkey are sought after by collectors, but they don't always seem to rank highly in those side-by-side matchups. So I think this is going to be a really interesting exploration, and I'm hoping I can find someone especially fun to explore it with. Could that someone be you? Drop me a line below or at mytinybottles.com or at mytinybottles on social media. Cheers!